I'm delighted to be here today and delighted to welcome the panel we have as we discuss and look into this increasingly important and significant area of well-being. So I'd like to start by introducing, first of all, Sam Hart, who is the co-founder of TeachStrong. And Sam spends a lot of time, since he co-founded the organisation, going around to schools, speaking to teachers, delivering workshops to improve well-being. We focus to Alice. Alice founded or co-founded Now Press Play. She has a drama musical background and looks at, through this organisation, how you can develop sort of audio resources based on music and drama to help every child achieve. And these are woven through and part of the curriculum. And then we move on, last but not least, Peter Adams, who is the CEO of Alife. You've probably seen his store here. He, in fact, goes around schools, again, focusing on well-being and health, doing it with both teachers and children. And the statistics show, seen over 1 million children, been involved over 1 million children, over 1,000 teachers. So we welcome you. We're looking forward to hear what you have to say. So if I start with Sam, over to you.
Thank you, Catherine. Good afternoon, everyone. When I was first given the topic for today's panel, the first thought that came to my mind is how student well-being and staff well-being are inextricably linked. By addressing one, we address the other. And the direction of this relationship that I want to explore, of course, is how staff influence pupils. I'm sure many of you sitting here believe that staff well-being affects pupil well-being, but we also have studies now proving that that is the case. We've seen that if staff are stressed, anxious, or even depressed, that will have an effect not only on pupil well-being, but also their attainment and progress. So are teachers stressed at the moment? Well, yes, they are. 72% of educational professionals would describe themselves as stressed. So how can we hope to create a safe and happy environment if the people working there are stressed? So there are many aspects to our job that need improving to reduce stress, such as workload, accountability, pupil behaviour. These are major aspects that are affecting our working conditions and the environment, and we all need to be a part of this conversation. Alongside this, however, we believe that there is a more empowering approach that we can take, and that is looking at what we do every day. So what we can change right here, right now. Things that we do every day, so that despite our current working conditions, we can give ourselves the best fighting chance of creating that happy environment, not just for us, but for the pupils that we teach as well. At TeachStrong, we believe that while we are striving for change, we can't let our health deteriorate until things get better. We've got a duty to look after our well-being, because it's only when we take care of ourselves that we can take care of other people. Now, the idea that I want to share with you is that addressing our well-being is not going to add to your workload, it's not expensive, it's not time-consuming, and it certainly shouldn't be viewed as a fad. Actually, it's just some quick, simple tweaks to your routine and to your environment, and that will have the real effect on you. So I propose that one of the most effective and practical things we can do with staff across the country is look at 5 key components for a happy, healthy life. And these are nutrition, what we eat, movement, how much we move during the day, our inner well-being, so that feeling of inner peace and calm, sleep, the quality and quantity of our sleep, and also community, so the relationships that we have with those around us. Now, in doing so, that is how we will be happier and healthier, calmer, less stressed, sleep better, and that's how we'll create that safe and happy environment for us and our pupils. So if we look at each aspect and how they can be improved in the most effective and practical way. Nutrition, we believe it's very easy. just no matter what your diet is, more plants, more fruit, more veg, more beans. These are packed with fibre, which create a feast for the good bacteria in your gut. And we know that that is linked to our immune system, but also to our mental health as well. So we would say, start your day with overnight oats, which are full of whole grains and nuts and seeds and fruit as well, or keep you full until lunch, but also packed with vitamins and minerals and all those things for a healthy life. Another idea might be to add beans wherever you can. Beans are superfood; they are our friend. Chuck them in salads and soups wherever you like. If we look around the world at the people that live the longest and happiest lives, they eat beans every day, so why aren't we? If we look at movement, the other component, let's just focus on moving naturally throughout the day, not worrying about the gym or weights or entering a half marathon. Just focus on those body weight movements that we can do. Things like walking and dance and yoga. It really is that easy. We know that exercise is linked to happiness, so let's take advantage of that. So a tip could be just a quick 10-minute workout before school. It could be starting an after-school walking club with colleagues, or maybe even swapping a Netflix session in the evenings for just popping on a podcast on your headphones and going for a walk around the block. If we look at inner well-being, we know that mindfulness meditation is a really powerful tool, and it can be so quick as well. So let's take advantage of that. Just throughout the day, look for opportunities where you can pause, be mindful, be present. So that could be when the kettle is boiling, you just pause, take a deep breath. When you're about to eat your lunch, pause, take a deep breath, be present. And also there's lots of great free meditation apps out there now, aren't they? So make 5 minutes in the morning or in the evening. It doesn't seem like a lot of time, but it really will make the difference. My next little tip is around sleep. This is a common complaint around teachers, one that has a huge impact on health and well-being, and we won't improve our health if we're not sleeping better. So my tips are, no electronics in the bedroom, no screens an hour before bed, and also blackout curtains if you can buy them. Create a completely dark and ideally quieter environment that is just made for sleep. And finally, community. Much like sleep, I think this is an underappreciated aspect of well-being, but our connections with others form an integral part of our well-being and our health. And so we've got to be steadfast in our commitment to surrounding ourselves with positive and inspirational people. They say that you're the average of the 5 people closest to you, don't they? So let's make sure that they're having a positive effect. So what I'd say around community is make time to see those people face to face that will have that positive impact on you and will inspire you. Eliminate negative accounts from social media. That's a big one. And also join a club. Join a running club, a chess club, a knitting club. It doesn't really matter what it is, just as long as you're seeing people face to face outside of work. Okay. So I believe if we tackle those 5 things inside and outside of school, then staff will be more positive, more passionate and more productive. And then we can watch that ripple effect on the pupils as well. We can be the example to the next generation. So looking forward to hearing what the panel think of what I've said and you guys as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sam, for that. Before we move on, can I just remind everybody, if you want to ask a question, if you join us at slido.com, go to Education Show and hashtag Bett 2020, and the questions will appear on our screen here. Okay, so I would like to move on now to Alice.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alice, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Now Press Play. We are an education social enterprise, and we make immersive audio resources for primary school children. So what happens in a Now Press Play session is every child puts on a pair of pink wireless headphones. You may have seen some children wearing them out there in front of our stand. And for 20 minutes to half an hour, they become the main character in that story. They move around, they act things out. They might go back in time if they're learning about history, or to a different country if they're learning about geography. And we believe that this increases children's well-being by making learning meaningful and memorable. It's bringing in the arts, which we're seeing a sad decline of in schools. But actually, what I want to talk to you about today is not what we do, because whilst I believe that our organisation is contributing to children's well-being, I think that can only ever be one part of it. And really, I want to back up a lot of what Sam has said, and that well-being in our schools has to start with the staff. So let me back up a little bit. In response to the new PSHE curriculum, the new Ofsted framework, and our demands from our schools, we created a mental health experience, a mental wellbeing experience last year, one for Key Stage 1 and one for Key Stage 2. And I was part of a group of people who put those experiences together, who created them. And in doing the research for this experience, I learned that I don't know very much about well-being, and I'm sure I'm not the only person who is receiving these well-being and mental health frameworks, trying to get up to scratch so that we can deliver this for our children, and is struck by the irony that I might be able to take in this information and know it, but if I'm not practicing it in my day-to-day life, there's a real imbalance there and a bit of a contradiction, because I'm sure we all know as educators, children learn as much from what we do and how we behave than the information that we give them. And we know, as Sam has mentioned, there are several studies showing that our schools are some of the unhealthiest and unhappiest workplaces in the UK. Over half of teachers have a diagnosable mental health problem, and over 76 reports that their job has had an impact on their behaviour and on their physicality, and that is 16% above the average workplace. So if we're talking about well-being in schools, we have to start with our staff, because it's no prizes for guessing that children learn better when their teachers are happy, and if their teachers are not and they have to take time off, then they get a supply teacher, and there's an inconsistency there in how they're being taught. So we have to start with the staff, and I want to share with you some of the things that we have done at Now Press Play to encourage well-being in our staff, and then look at what schools can do. So we have a weekly team meeting, and what we start with is highs and lows. So we invite people to celebrate something that's gone well, but also to share something that hasn't. And it's not highs and maybe a low if you can think of one. It's highs and lows, because we accept that people will have challenges, and we want to make them welcome to bring those things in. Sometimes those lows are to do with work, sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's helpful for someone to be able to say, I'm not sleeping very well because my child isn't sleeping well. So we accept that those lows are a normal part of everyday life. We also celebrate achievements. We encourage everybody when we sign up a new school or when we've got some good feedback, we share that with everyone, and that gives everyone a chance to say well done and create those moments of celebration. We also once a month look at personal goals, things that people are working on, our staff are working on outside of work, got nothing to do with work, and often, not always, those things will be contributing to people's well-being. So a lot of people have exercise goals that they talk about, or maybe they just want to do more reading. We've had pottery mentioned. But we're encouraging people to bring their whole selves to work and everything they want to be, not just focusing on work. And we've also introduced a physical space within our office where staff can go to practice yoga or meditation, or just to sit and be quiet and read a book. Our environment is a shared open plan office, and if you're struggling and feeling not terribly well, a lot of those symptoms are physical. You might get tearful, you might start shaking, and you may just need a private space. This is especially true in schools when there are children everywhere. And so having that physical space, I think, gives our staff a sense that we know they will struggle at times, and here's somewhere that they can go. So that's what we've done in our environment, and we work with children every day, but we don't work with them consistently. And so it's even more important that we're introducing these measures into schools. And some of you may have heard Kerry Hill from Ayers Monsell Primary School give an incredibly inspirational speech yesterday, and I just want to share with you some of the outcomes that came out of that to show you how important this is. So in one academic year in her school, they had 151 days where staff were off ill for reasons of mental ill health and well-being. That was costing them £22,000 a year in supply staff, and that's just the financial cost. The cost to the children's learning is also something that we can begin to imagine. They introduced a radical well-being program. They told staff that they could take a duvet day a year, so if they couldn't get into school, that was an acceptable thing to do. They brought in after-school exercise classes, free fruit and free fruits in the staff room, well-being buddies. They had over 100 initiatives brought in for their staff. The following year, no members of staff took any days off for mental well-being issues. So these initiatives make an impact, and that impact trickles down. So whilst it is wonderful that well-being is now high on the agenda in terms of the curriculum that we are delivering for our children, we also have to think about practicing what we preach. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. That was very informative. Okay, just to remind you again, if you've got any questions, keep them coming in. Slido.com, education show, #Bett 2020. Okay, I would like to move on to Peter now.
Hi there. So my name is Peter Adams from A-Life. I started the company 16 years ago, and my aim was to basically make children more active. I actually started off, right, let's get a great fitness session going, and did that a little while and realised it's not going to change their lives. So built a program called A-Life, which basically we go into schools. Like I said, we've taught over 1 million children now, and I'm all about hands-on. So we try and keep talking to an absolute minimum. 2 minutes talk at the start. We can see 300 children in a day, and the children go around loads of different activities, investigating, putting their body together, building puzzles. So they're learning through audio, kinesthetic, and visual learning, which also tackles the SEN, because it's not just about getting the individual children who are obese or the individual children, it's about everyone being healthy and well-being. So we try and tackle the whole school at the time, including the parents and teachers, so we try and bring the parents in. So the healthy workshops, you're very welcome to visit my stand. It's just outside of this room, and you'll see some of the resources that we bring to life. So we do healthy workshops, fitness, drugs awareness, and we're launching, which is quite exciting, in the next few months, a mental health workshop. Because although I totally agree, it does start with staff well-being. That is so key to being healthy, and it drips through. We kind of tackle it the other way around. We kind of tackle it with the children. And I've got 3 children myself. If you can get down on your knees and play with them and get involved with what they're doing, then actually the messages drip to the parents and the teachers as well. So with teachers, sometimes they've had a whole session, a whole day. They don't want to hear someone talk for an hour. So if they can actually just be playing, seeing what the children have been doing, they'll be drip feeding the messages. With the mental health workshop, it's quite similar, Sam, because we based it on the evidence-based 5 ways to well-being. Can anyone in the audience tell me what they are? Anyone shout one out? It's what all the councils are trying to push on all their different websites. It's, anyone? Which one? Be active. Yes, number 1. So kind of similar. Anyone else? Give it a stab. No, everyone's shy. So we've actually called it Get Calm, because I actually couldn't remember them myself. So we've called it Get Calm, and it's an acronym for giving to others. So get giving. So when we give to other people, you're not focused on yourself the whole time. Connecting is the second one. Okay, and when we connect with other people, and people often with mental health problems, they sit at home on their own, But actually, if we're out connecting with other people, it makes a humongous difference. Being active, which my friend gave, obviously that's linked to sleep as well. Being active will help with their sleep. The fourth one is learning. Okay, when we learn, children feel that, and adults feel that they've learned something, their sense of achievement, and obviously it helps your pathways in your brain. And the fifth one is very similar, mindful. Actually enjoying the now, not worrying about the future, not being worried about what you did in the past, actually just enjoying what's going on now. So we're launching that in the next few months, and it's going to be super hands-on, very audio-visual. So that is us, but it's probably best just visit the stand. That's where you'll see what we actually bring to the schools. That is me for now.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Just say thank you to all our panelists. And to sum up, we have from Sam really 5 key areas of focus, focusing on what we eat, are we what we eat, movement, quiet moments of meditation, sleep, and our relationships with others. We have Alice focusing on really, we've got to focus on the well-being of staff. And then we have Peter, who says, although that's very important, which it is, they tend to start with the children, focusing on the well-being of the children. So I'd like to open it up for questions. Perhaps before we move to the floor, we've got some that have appeared here on Slido. And I think the first one that appeared was one for Sam, actually. So if we start with you, is there any evidence to support your advice?
Yes, absolutely. There's a whole host of evidence. I think the question isn't specific about which part of my advice, so if I just go through each one. In terms of nutrition, I realise that when we talk about adding more plants, then people can get. It's a bit of a sensitive topic, talking about what teachers and TAs or anyone that works in the school eats, but more and more we're seeing over the last couple of years a huge amount of evidence around the fact that we need to be eating more whole food, plant-based ingredients. You can visit our website for links to research if you like to, or by all means come up to me to talk about, and I can point you in the right direction as well. But if we look at nutrition, one example of research was published by the Eat Foundation, it was published in The Lancet, which is I think one of, if not the oldest medical journal in the world. So check out that. That's a really great resource about food and how it impacts health, not only health, but also our environment as well. So check out that for nutrition. Movement, I think that everyone is well aware of the impact of physical activity and exercise, but so perhaps this question wasn't around exercise. Well-being and mindfulness, yes, 10 or 20 years ago perhaps there wasn't so much research, but now more and more. I think there's, over 4,000 peer-reviewed studies looking just at mindfulness out there, and they show these effects not just on adults but on children as well. There's plenty of research out there for that. In terms of sleep, there's a fascinating guy called Professor Matthew Walker. I don't know if anyone's heard of him. He's a sleep expert, so if you want to find out about more evidence around sleep, then please look for Matthew Walker, watch his TED Talk. It's amazing. And in terms of community, I guess I can't quite put my finger on the exact research around community, but I think all of us here would agree that our connections with others is so important, and being a part of a community is absolutely vital. Okay.
Thank you, Sam. It's very helpful. I think to add to that, actually, there's a lot of focus as well, strengths-based learning that places, which is something we don't do so much in this country. It tends to come through social care rather than education, that places very much the person and relationships at the centre of everything. So very similar to what you're advising. Okay, thank you. And perhaps staying on the same note, we'll come back to Alice in a second, but Peter, that question there, how do you all practice well-being yourselves? So would you like to comment on that?
I was hoping I'd get that one. Yeah, that's what I was writing notes for. So actually, with building habits, it starts best from a young age. I've got 3 young children myself, and it's drip feeding it in. The amount of times I tell them brush your teeth, and it's dripping them in from a young age. That's obviously going to make a huge difference. So that's what we teach with the children. However, you've got to be a role model. You've got to live it. Fortunately, I play rugby for GB tag rugby. I used to play rugby till I was 18, and then about 3 years ago, I just turned up to the local tag rugby and kind of got my rugby skills back again. And it's really good fun. But again, it does bring in stuff like tag rugby with the 5 ways to well-being. You're giving, you're connecting, you're being active, you're learning, and you're being mindful. You're in the moment. So team-based sports is a humongous thing with mental health and with sleeping, and then you have to eat right because you need the energy. So I think, you've got to practice what you preach, which is key. The sleep bit is one thing I'm working on with my 3 kids, but what can you do?
Okay, thank you, Peter. And there's just a comment here which I think is good to know. I can claim that in my school, the focus on overall well-being does change the atmosphere in a positive way. Okay, moving on then, let's see. Alice, it would be quite good actually, we've got somewhere here to define well-being. It's often quite nebulous. And, for me, the cultural change in the school needs to come with the approach. Now, you spoke about the approach you're taking, where you have these meetings and what you focus on. So would you like to sort of develop the defining well-being within that for us?
Very good. Well, this is a great question, actually, because I think I agree, well-being is a nebulous term. And I'm not ashamed to admit that I did look up the definition ahead of this panel. So I can tell you that, my definition is about how comfortable you are in your day-to-day life. And I think the reason that well-being is useful as a term as opposed to perhaps mental health is that I think it's easier for us to understand that we all have a sense of well-being. I think when we introduce concepts like mental health, people might think, I don't have a diagnosed mental health problem, therefore this doesn't apply to me. Of course it does. We all have mental health. It's on a sliding scale. But if we're talking about well-being, it's perhaps something that people are able to approach a little bit more. So if we think about day-to-day, our well-being, how happy do we feel in our home life, in our work life, in our physical environment? That's my understanding. And I think for those of you working in schools, perhaps in leadership roles, it's a really kind of helpful, inclusive and accessible term to use. Moving on to the second part, and actually this relates to a comment that we've had come up here about leadership in mental health and well-being, and I completely agree that in a school everything comes from the head teacher and from the SLT, and that's true in any organisation. It has to start from the top and come down, which doesn't mean that the head has to be the person to kick it off, but because I think someone's kind of lower down can feed that information in. For those of you who are not in leadership roles, you are able to go back and share this information, but really to make it consistent and to have those consistent changes, it does have to come from the top. And evidence shows that senior leaders are actually the people who are most in need of this kind of support. They report much higher stress levels than teaching staff. So it really, the importance of it has to be understood at that level. And again, that's just as teaching staff need to practice what they preach for their children, again, the leadership have to practice what they preach for staff. And a lot of that, I think, is about being vulnerable in front of your staff, which can be something that's incredibly difficult to do. I know as someone in a senior position, I feel like I need to project strength a lot of the time, and that I'm not able to talk to my staff maybe when I'm having a difficult day or when I haven't been sleeping well. And so I now really try and challenge that feeling in myself, because it's not helpful for me and it's actually not helpful for them. So if I'm struggling, I really try and say that. When we have our highs and lows, I'll try and be the brave one in the room and say, actually, I'm feeling a bit down today. And that then gives permission for other people to talk at that level. So it does have to start at the top.
Okay, thank you, Alice. One question I would just like to comment on. We hear a lot now in the last few years about well-being, mental health amongst children and staff. Is it a new issue, or are people more under pressure today, or why now? Did we not need it 10 years ago or 15 years ago? I don't know. Sam, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, tough question. I think there's many factors. In terms of working in schools is tough and has got tougher in terms of the paperwork. I think pupil behaviour has got worse. And the accountability. So all of that, is leading to more stress amongst teachers, isn't it? But also as a society, we are more stressed, and there's many reasons around that. Social media is a factor. We're constantly comparing our lives with other people, and that can be great for our social media can be great for our well-being in terms of connecting with friends and family, but it also can be a real drain when we're comparing ourselves to others. I've talked about diet as well. That is another factor. Our diet has got worse in the last few decades. I think there's so many reasons why we are feeling the way we are, not just in schools, but as a whole across the country.
Okay, thank you. And move on. It's a question here for Alice, agreeing partly with Alice about staff. The first one on board has to be the head. Would you add anything to that, or do you feel you've already covered it with what you've already said?
Well, I suppose what I could also do is slightly argue against myself in saying that whilst it's going to be most effective when it is coming top down, we all have a responsibility for our own and each other's mental health. And if that conversation is not happening in your school, I'd encourage you to be the one to start it. We each have responsibility for ourselves, but we can create the kinds of environments we want to work in, and just by being a little bit vulnerable or being a little bit brave, that does encourage people to follow.
Okay, thank you. And a question for Peter: when you go into schools and you're talking to the children or talking to the staff, what advice do you give them generally? If you're sort of looking to the future, long-term well-being, not just a sort of instant fix and feel-good factor, what advice would you give them?
So I always leave them a challenge of, once they've explored the activities and learnt some things and had some fun, it's habits. What habits have you got? And I get them all talking, what are your good habits and what's a habit you can work on? And even I do that with year 3 upwards, really. Year 2s and below, I just talk about keeping healthy, how you can keep healthy, sleep and teeth. But actually, and the younger ones, it's really to do with parents, and parents are key. But as they go from year 3, year 4, year 5, they have the responsibility. They have more and more responsibility as they get older. They're choosing the food, they're choosing, I know the parents will buy it, but they're choosing what they're actually putting in their mouth. So I kind of just say to them, actually, it's your habits. Of course you can eat chocolate and still be healthy. Of course you can, but it's about, because if you just say, oh, no, you can't, then they're not going to, you can't tell them that. You've got to actually just say, you eat food because it gives you energy. You eat food, it gives you the nutrients your body needs. You eat food because it keeps you alive. And so it's really those things to build with the children and almost help the parents as well. So, yeah.
Okay, that's great. I think time for one more question. Are there any questions from the floor? There's one there. I don't know. Alice, perhaps, have you had much experience of project-based learning? There's a lot of evidence that shows that does help build students' resilience. Would you like to say something about that?
Well, I'm going to be really honest. I've been staring at project-based learning. I'm not entirely sure what is meant by that. But I do, we understand projects as a short term. I think certainly focusing on these areas is really important, but the danger is that with the new PSHE curriculum, we're thinking in terms of assemblies or short-term learning. And actually, really, I think the most effective tools are to take a whole school approach and to weave this into our everyday. rather than the sort of occasional highlighting of these issues. And I suppose that is the danger, is that it's not being fed through in daily habits. And this is something that really should be talked about and practiced every single day.
Okay, thank you.